All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the weekly SIG Docs meeting. I'm Jim Angel, one of the co-chairs of SIG Docs. Today is August 4th, 2020, and it is 10:30 a.m. Pacific. So before we get started, are there any new contributors on this call who would like to introduce themselves? Yeah, we go.
Hello. Hi, I'm Abby. Technically a returning contributor, but mostly new because it's been so long since I've been able to contribute. So I'm really excited that I'm here to hear what you all are getting up to and excited to see how I can help out.
Awesome. Well, welcome back.
Welcome.
All right. Moving on to updates and reminders. This week's PR Wrangler is Karen Bradshaw at KB Hockey, and next week is Caitlin Bernard. And I've seen Karen very active in the PR, so I know there's no issues there. And then unrelated to the PR Wrangler, semi-related, I guess, it looks like we're around 130 open PRs right now, which is relatively healthy. I know traditionally we've shot for around 100 open PRs. I believe with our increased localization count and the amount of folks that we have with open PRs, I think 130 is a very reasonable number at this current time. If you are an approver, know that your PR Wrangler shifts, please. And there's a link in the docs there. Before going further, I will throw a link in chat with our agenda there. So moving on to the release 119 information. I saw Savita's not able to make it today, but she did report that the status is green, Dev 119 is healthy, and things all look good from a docs and release perspective. And do we have anyone here who's willing to talk a little bit about the blog if there's any updates that need to be discussed? Go for it, Tim.
I have one article, so I can speak about one of them for sure. I'm just going to bring up the label right now and gives me a second. Talk about what's open. Okay, so there's a couple of fixes. There is an article from Not Sure If Kevin. I think that needs a review. And there's the one from me. So room for some more articles coming in. And the article from Not Sure If Kevin, I think needs a sort of blog team more formal review than the informal review I've already given it. I have a feeling that, yeah. So at Castro Joe has asked for another set of eyes on that, and I'm not sure they've been followed up yet. Oh yeah, case study versus blog. Yeah, cool. I don't have any more to say.
Yeah, I appreciate the update, especially on a whim there. Hey, Brad, good to see you.
Hey, Jim.
So moving on to issues and PRs. So I did a couple here. One is just more for general awareness. The other one I brought up in the SIG Docs maintainer channel, and I appreciate the feedback I got from Tim, Karen, and Taylor. The first one here is a pull request for a networking. I don't want to misspeak here. I think it's a networking plugin, but in any event, the post that they're adding to or contributing to is just kind of an onslaught of various networking pieces of Kubernetes. And it kind of hits this gray area where there's existing precedents of this content existing. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a vendor pitch or inappropriate content, but just raising awareness that along the lines with our KEP or our Kubernetes enhancement proposal, and for the folks who aren't aware of what I'm talking about, there was a big effort put on to eliminate third-party content or vendor pitches or duplicated content in Kubernetes documentation. So if there is a Kubernetes document source as well as a GitHub README or something similar, you'd want to link that, as well as you don't just want a page where vendors are all just fighting for space. Just gets to be not helpful for anybody. What really is the goal of documentation for that? So I saw, Tim, you mentioned opening up in a tracking issue. I'm thinking it might make sense to just add this to the existing one. I saw Karen left a comment very similar to that for the tracking for the third-party content. The reason I wanted to bring this up here was not sure if this really falls under the third-party content Kubernetes enhancement proposal or not, or if it should be separate.
My instinct is that it does fall under the cap. Like, I'm kind of just expanding this up because here's the thing, when Entrea added itself to this page, I think we had the same conversation a few months ago of like, is this third-party content? Is it not? Like, added over here to this page we weren't really thinking about. But like the subtopic these all live under is how to implement the Kubernetes networking model. And then I think we need to ask ourselves, like, what is officially supported by SIG networking? This seems like a...
Go for it, Tim.
So 2 things on this. I think that you do need a network plugin of some kind, and most the CNI is the way things are going. So first question is like software that's necessary for Kubernetes to function as intended. Networking is part of that. I've noticed a trend, or I've noticed 2 kinds. There are things which are obviously CNI plugins, and I think there are fewer of those being added because the market for actual CNI plugins is quite healthy already. And then there are sort of tools for managing CNI plugins and adding another kind of integration to your network control plane. I've seen a few different PRs from people whose software is not necessary for Kubernetes to function, but you have a nicer experience with it. And whether it's a vendor pitch or not, I think that the cap was pretty clear that it necessary for Kubernetes to function was the criteria for linking to it. And so when I've looked at things which are clearly, you can get benefit from it, but it doesn't actually fall into this is a CNI on its own. I've said no, and I've rejected those PRs. The second thing I'm going to try and mention is that I think we should clean up this page. I think it's a difficult task, and I'm not saying we should have a target on when we do it, but we should aim to have it that there is in the Kubernetes documentation clear information on how to get the software you need for your Kubernetes cluster to function, and that we're not linking on that page to anything which goes against the cap.
So I'm actually looking into their documentation, and I found the link here. I just pasted it in the chat. And I have 2 comments about this document. First, the supported version of Kubernetes that document says is 1.9 and 1.10, which is very old.
Wow.
And 2, I don't think the way how they're trying to make the users install on top of Kubernetes, this plugin, is not really the Kubernetes way. So I think, I don't know if it's just me, but I thought in the common sense, these third-party plugin at least has to have a Kubernetes, GitHub repository, like it's supposed to be like open source, or like I don't know, at least give an open documentation, right? It might be just my opinion though.
I think
I'll
some
clarify
good
that
points.
specifically. You are totally allowed to link to third-party proprietary software, and SIG Windows would be very upset if that were not the case.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I'm not a Windows user in production, so yeah, maybe, yeah.
So like we obviously, sorry, I'll just carry on. Yeah, we obviously do links to Windows when we're explaining how to install Windows, and if you are running Windows nodes, I would argue that Windows is necessary for your cluster to behave as designed. And so anything where it's not, it is really clear that linking to proprietary software is fine.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I mean, either way, it's 1.10, so I would say no to this.
Yeah, I'm going to say no to this as well. So I'm reading the document that Kohei linked, which was very useful. And their definition of this plugin is installation of the VCF Kubernetes plugin allows interconnection between the Kubernetes platform and the CRDC controller. The controller can monitor traffic, deploy security policies, and provide networking services for pods in Kubernetes, which doesn't quite fit the bill of everything else on this page, I think. I think they're trying to sneak that in, so I think we should say no to this.
Come on, Brad, do you have something?
No, I pretty much what everyone else is saying. I mean, in some ways, yeah, if it's only a link, that's not so bad because it's clear that it's not our content, and if it, goes old, it's off to another site. But at the same time, this seems like not the right way to do things and seems out of date, and it seems hard to argue that this should really be there. It just really so. I channel towards, it's okay to add a link, but on this one, I'm thinking, it's not making the list, right?
Yeah, and after just talking out loud and hearing everyone's opinions about this and comments, I think we're all in alignment here, but I want to take this maybe one step further along with Tim's idea of that page is just kind of a massive dump of stuff, and it could definitely be improved for just general consumption. So I think my takeaway here is that PR might not be suitable for merging, make a comment on that. In addition to that, opening up an issue to clean up and review that page, not necessarily in line with the cut, but just from an information architecture standpoint, improving just general usability of that page while kind of referencing this, which sparked the conversation. Sound fair to everybody?
Yeah,
it makes sense to clean it up.
Awesome. Cool. Any other comments before we move on? I'll take the action item to open that up, and then we can go from there.
I have a comment, Jim.
Yep.
If we've got a list of things, in this case, it's network plugins, I think that ties in my mind to an improvement I want to make to the tasks page. So I'm going to mention it. And that is that a bit like the glossary lets you select things by tag or search for things within the page. I think there's a case for letting visitors to the website say, I'm looking for something in this page, rather than giving them a big long list. Maybe there is a UI improvement we can make. And seeing that this is tied in, what you suggested for tidying up the network plugin page, maybe we can take a common approach there. I'll bear that in mind.
Yeah, I just made a note. I'll tag you and I open up that issue. And if we want to start linking them together, make it a little bit more generalized for that, I would be I'd be okay with that.
What might also be a good idea, because this has come up quite a few times in a very short time span of like a few months since we've stuck our flag in the ground for the cap. It might be a good idea to create like a general note that we can just reference from a bunch of pages saying like third-party content can be added to, like links to other projects can be added to these pages under certain conditions only. And those conditions are, it is this lists vital plugins that you need for Kubernetes to run. Things that are deemed non-vital will be rejected. Here's a link to the CAP and the content guidelines so you can make that evaluation for yourself. But I think it's fair to warn people at this point, or at the very least when we release 119, saying this page is monitored and managed in a specific way.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and I like the idea of clearing that ambiguity, just in general up, so we could reference that specific document, wherever that ends up living. Is that something you'd want to own, or is there somebody on this call who would like to pick that up?
I would be happy to own that.
Awesome.
And to Tim's comment in the chat about a comment, like an HTML comment almost, I actually think there is some benefit to doing that publicly. And that's actually, it's the CNCF's website guidelines that if you are listing certain kinds of services, it's like alphabetical order only if it's like absolutely required. It doesn't count as an endorsement if it's listed here necessarily. So I think it is actually beneficial to list it publicly for users as well, so that they are clear that we're maintaining neutrality.
So Celeste, maybe a Hugo shortcode at the top of the page so it's clear, and then in text at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Awesome. Any other comments around this before moving on? Cool. Hearing nothing. So this next issue or this next PR is more for general awareness. I didn't realize this until just poking around while we were chatting. It's actually directly related to the previous PR in some ways. In short, KubeADM or SIG multi-cluster lifecycle opened up a pull request to remove the instructions for installing the Calico CNI at the end of their setup documentation. The reason for doing so was they didn't feel like it was appropriate for their special interest group to choose winners and losers, to say, if you're setting up Kubernetes and you're using KubeADM, we're not saying Calico is our choice. We're just using it because we always have. So ultimately they said, hey, we're not in the spot to pick winners and losers. We should be linking documentation to all the other CNI plugins, which happens to be that page that we're talking about cleaning up. And in just general practice and general theory, I think this PR makes a lot of sense, especially because the position that KubeADM is put in for, oh, if you have this CNI, why don't you have mine? Or why don't you have mine as an example? And it just ad infinitum will just create so much of a responsibility burden that I don't think KubeADM or that team wants to manage. Now, the flip side of that, and so I will say I saw this PR when I was doing a PR wrangling shift, and I approved it. That was roughly 5 days ago or so. And then we started to see noise and issues as well as other comments on K website that there's a question in the CKA exam that will leverage needing instructions on installing a CNI. So obviously for reasons, I don't know the exact agreement, but we can't talk question specifics of the CKA, but there's definitely now a gap where there's information that previously existed in the Kubernetes documentation that has been removed that's impacting users who are taking tests today. Now, one additional thing I'll mention is that I have messaged the CNCF. I've talked to some folks there, including the folks that are actually in charge of creating, managing, maintaining the CKA exam. And I've offered some suggestions for ways we can temporarily alleviate this problem, potentially avoid further issues and do a kind of a quick fix as it pertains to the testing documentation. So basically putting that content in the test questions itself, as opposed to relying on the Kubernetes website, so it doesn't impact users' ability to take the test. Now, once again, these are all suggestions. These are not things that folks are doing. So here we're in the situation now where there's an exam, a certified Kubernetes administrator exam, doesn't have all the information it needs to complete a question successfully. While one thing, if folks don't know, you can use the Kubernetes documentation while taking this test, but you can't use outside information or outside links. And then we're in this kind of pickle, if you will, where KubeADM says, hey, we shouldn't be in charge of picking who we choose for a CNI. It should be up to the end user. But as we all have just seen from that last PR, that information is kind of a mess right now.
Yeah. So there's a difference between saying this is the blessed way to do it, and for instructional purposes, here's one example that may help you on your way. And it seems like they took a really harsh stand instead of just trying to, I understand they don't want the floodgates to open and have to support 10 of these, right? But it seems like there should be situations when you can say, as an example, we use this one for completeness, and here's a link to the several others that should work very similarly. To me, that seems like we're doing less harm than removing something that somebody actually needed for the exam. it seems like there ought to be cases where you can just say, oh, for instructional purposes, here's one. And yes, we're not in any way stating that that is the blessed way to do it.
So let me throw a quick wild card at you. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I completely agree. You know, that wouldn't be too harmful to say here's a suggested route. But the way it was when they removed it, and in the PR, there's at least 3 or 4 examples of different CNIs you could use. I believe Cilium was in there, Calico was in there, Weavenet was in there. It's kind of like choose your own adventure. So now it would be on CubeADM to say, here, out of the 3 that we used to have in support, now we're going to go to 1. It's a different issue, I would imagine. But I mean, does that change your opinion at all? Or you think still choose one and just say, this is our example one? And obviously this is not our question to answer, but just talking out loud helps.
Yeah, if I was them, I would make it clear to those choices. We don't want to maintain all this content, and maybe start shopping for a new owner, and then I'll link to you. And then maybe they could link to those things. I've seen that problem before. Hey, we don't want to own all this content anymore, and we got to shop it around. And I don't blame them. And yeah, you're right. If you already have 3, going down to 1, I think is really tough. That is just going to ruffle feathers and upset people. So I didn't realize that dynamic. That is a little trickier.
Yeah, I have to. Two perspectives actually about this. One, as a user of the documentation website, I think these kind of tasks should be like where you can find basic all information, so that like you can do these things, you know, completely. As this has been deleted, I think some people actually have trouble with finding where can I install this? Node is not ready forever. What can I do this? How can I solve this problem? So, I mean, even reading the documentation, it is still confusing. And as you can see, CRI, a container runtime installation, is in the documentation. So it is still doable. But for installing networks, there's no any documentation, right, so far. And you have to go to an official website for each CNI installation. And yeah, that can be a problem. That's the first perspective. And the second one is for localization. Of course, I'm leading the Japanese translation. This is a huge impact, I think, in my opinion.
It's a fair point. And I saw Tim, you had your hand up too. Do you have any comments there?
So I actually think that the page about installing container runtimes might be on the umbrella issue for cleanup, because it has the same, I mean, it's a smaller number of container runtimes, but it has the same, let me put the page that Kohei is talking about there in the chat, but it has the same challenges. You know, someone who's authored a container runtime might say, I want my container runtime listed, please. The difference with CubeADM, I think, is that CubeADM has an idea of like, I know what I will use if you don't tell me. And I think CubeADM forces you to set up a networking, you know, like, or to make a choice.
No, it doesn't. It does not. So you can
have a default choice.
No, it doesn't. Because the container runtime installation and container networking installation is completely separated from their scope.
Yeah, and I can confirm that as well. You can put in flags and parameters in your CubeADM init or your install documentation, but there's not necessarily a default. Whereas like something with you know, like running Kubernetes and Docker, that does have a default. If you don't specify a CNI, it will automatically plug one in. Yeah,
for runtime, they will automatically find the existing socket. Then it will detect which runtime you have and up and running. But for installing container networking, because you have to set up the control plane in the first place. So installing networking plugin is after the CubeADM's task.
So I looked at the kubeadm page, and it says that it uses Docker as its default runtime.
Yeah, my
But
apologies.
That's per OS.
Yeah, and I was talking about the CNI. There's no default CNI for it, but yeah, it will default to using Docker if you don't specify anything. Like Kohei said, is looking for the Unix socket being exposed, I believe. But you can specify to use like Containerd if you want, or a different provider.
Yeah, at least at the point of 1.18, because Cryo doesn't still have the 1.80 release on Ubuntu. It didn't work for me, but for Containerd, it just worked like magic for the installation wise, for runtime, not networking.
Cool. Yeah.
I've got a question about how how SIG Docs and how Kubernetes contributors sort of interact with the syllabus and exam setters. Like, you might be able to talk, like, without giving away any secrets, how does that work?
Yeah, so to be completely frank, there's not really a clear path for communication between the two of them. Obviously, Celeste, SAC folks are involved with the CNCF, and there's the ability to have that communication there. In particular for myself, I knew the folks who represented the CKA exam and the CKAD exam, and had involvement with working sessions on them and developing the test. So I knew who to reach out to and who to contact. But beyond that, really just saying, hey, we're here to help. We're documentarians able to assist where we need be. Short of that, there's really not like a, hey, we changed this question, let's make sure it's in the docs. It's almost assumed that if a question is getting changed or updated, that the docs are already present, in my opinion. And that's not a formal policy, that's just what I've seen.
To mine and Zach and I are a part of the CNCF, but that's actually about as far as it goes. The people who run the exams are totally separate. And the CNCF, bless its heart, is very bad at communicating between its silos. So, so we don't know them super, super well. Yeah, but that said, we would be the path typically, or just even emailing Chris is the path. On the note of the kubeadm stuff, the technical writer answer is that a third-party plugin should maintain its own documentations for integrating with us. Because it's, as soon as you get into the business of maintaining somebody else's like setup installations, like they're not in your company, they could change things at any time. They might not remember to go and update your documentation. So like, if Kubernetes is our product, the easier way for us to manage this long-term is to say, there's an integration over there, but you're gonna have to go over there for their instructions. But the exams are a problem. I really don't know what the solution to that is.
Yeah, and I don't think we necessarily need to come up with a solution on this call either. I really was hoping that we can all be aware that the issue exists, kind of understand the scope of the problem, understand the multiple alternatives for resolving this. I think the powers that be for the CK exam are aware of this issue. The folks who are engaged from the kubeadm side are aware of some of the comments going on from the PR perspective. I think all of our communications have been sent out. I don't think this is necessarily a SIG Docs problem, short of just giving general guidance and being able to help out. Had the CKA folks reached out to me and said, let's revert that PR. We don't have the mental capacity to, or the capacity to be able to adjust the exam on the fly or deal with this massive of a change, then we can reevaluate. That would also be a fair option. But once again, I think that the people who need to be engaged are engaged and aware of this, and we're just kind of on standby, in my opinion. Cool. One last thing here too is that in September there is going to be an update for the CKA exam. They're going to refresh a few of the questions or all of the questions, and that could change potentially the outcome or the resolution for this issue as well. To be honest, I have no idea. So something to be aware of too. Cool. And moving on, talking Hugo Doxy in a container. I don't have a major update on this. I know Celeste, you've been out for a while. I don't know if you have anything else. And Kohei, I saw you added in a question here. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, sure. So I also posted this question in the SIG Docs, actually. The question was that there seems to be like a new update. So the main repository, master branch now has the package JSON and package dot lock JSON. Yeah, it was actually a month ago. Oh, I didn't notice, but the README suggests to have yarn and npm. It does make sense to me because package lock JSON is usually handled by package npm, and yarn should have should require yarn.lock, which is another like completely different file. So that was one thing. And another thing is the documentation implies you should manage these dependencies in your local machine, but you guys are trying to make it containerized, right? The whole process of building. So I was not sure if you want to manage these dependencies, including package JSON, include the inside of the container or outside, just like as it is now. Yeah, that's my question.
Good question. So I ran yarn while you were talking, just locally. And I'm pretty sure yarn.lock is actually on our git ignore for this repo, which is why it hasn't been committed yet. So git
Actually, when I tried it in my local,
yeah,
it appeared as new file.
yeah. It just appeared for me too. That's an interesting question. And
Yes, so it's completely doesn't make sense to me because it says new file, and yeah, the document says yarn as the requirement. Yeah, I understand this part, but why have you not kept this in the Git repository yet?
Why do we have good old package JSON floating around? Tim.
So we use npm to package up the dev dependencies that Netlify uses to do CSS minification.
Yeah, I understand that part. The point is yarn versus npm.
Well, I wonder if we're going to be using both. For
no,
yeah.
Because you basically have to choose either. And this is like, you're not choosing either in this situation because the dependency lock suggests you have to use npm, but the documentation says yarn. So
we should use what Netlify is going to use. Netlify is going to use package.json. So I think we should use package.json and the lock that goes with it.
So this was just sorry, can I say one more thing?
Hmm?
So I don't know, it's just one it was just one thing, a one-time thing, or it was just my local environment, but like npm ci, which it's a command, npm ci, which read the dependency from the lock JSON and install it into the node module file folder. Didn't work quite well for me, but yarn command worked. So I might have did something wrong. So I want you to make sure if it's right or not. Yeah. So yeah, that was even confusing for me. Maybe I did something wrong. I hope I do something wrong. Yeah. yeah, so yeah, we have to test it before we decide it.
Yeah, that sounds fair to me. To be completely honest with everyone on this call, I need to do more research into the different approaches, so I have really nothing of value to add. But it sounds like from Tim's suggestion, we should be using what Netlify uses. And as Kohei's suggestion, maybe there's some problems with the way that NPM is running locally, and regardless, there's some testing to be done there.
Yeah. So this is one answer for my question. And the other one is the goal of this management. Is it inside of Docker or outside of, I mean, container? Because it now requires NPM inside of the, no, in the local machine. But I think the container image already have the NPM. Docker file has the installation process of the NPM.
So I do believe that the plan is to run Hugo inside of the container. And if you're going to run Hugo, I would imagine you'd also have NPM also inside of the container. But, you know, other folks on the call, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just talking off of just making assumptions here.
So I just shared in the chat, the line 18 in Docker file. It has NPM installation.
Yeah. Interesting. And
Yeah, interesting
the
indeed.
file also looking for Node rather than Yarn. So why is Yarn here? What are you installing, Yarn? Ay.
So do we want to open an issue and track this, or someone want to take the action item to test this or come up with direction moving forward, or do we just want to have general awareness? I guess I'll leave this up to other folks in the call here.
We should look into this and track it, but I don't have time this week to take this on.
Okay.
I can have a look.
Okay. Go ahead. Would you mind just opening up an issue that we could all track? Feel free to copy the parties that are interested in this. And then as if you want to take a look and update the issue, maybe it's something that you could resolve and we can move forward.
Yeah. Either way, I was about to open the issue. I mean, I didn't get any answer in the Slack, so I was just waiting for the answer. But yeah, I was willing to do that.
Cool. And I see that Tim threw in chat there that he's willing to help troubleshoot, and you can add him to any PRs if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
Cool. Let me just update the notes here.
So I will make the issue, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. So moving on. So last week we had our APAC meeting, and there was 4 contributors, some that I've met for the first time. All of them were new to me, but some folks who have been involved in the community. And it was a great chance to meet people and to hear about some of their challenges with docs and localization. But there were 2 things, and there's probably more than just 2, but 2 things that really stood out to me that I couldn't answer in the call about how localization teams are managing certain aspects of their contributions. So the first thing was the localization teams were struggling with keeping up with what pages change on a regular basis. And I thought that the Korean localization team had some scripts that they used, but I didn't want to talk out of line if they didn't. And so I'm curious, and Kohei, I'm really looking to you on this one as well for input, is how localization teams are tracking what docs are actually changing and how they track those and keep up with that.
Very good question, because I do not think we have the standardized means to do this. So I believe that every localization team do have their own standard and their own scheme and their own milestones. So everything is basically independent because I mean, it is really difficult to force or make them follow a certain way because depending on the localization team, the number of contributors are really different. For example, a Korean localization team has been doing really well. Yeah, I think they're the only team that has successfully been doing like everything well, like having like lots of number of translated pages and keeping updates and like a lot of milestones in one minor version. Like for example, like 1.17, I think, and they went to the 8th work branch, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like the 8th milestone in one minor version, which is impressive because now we only have the 3rd of 1.17. So yeah, Korean is like, I think the most successful team as in the localization, but we are still keeping it up as well. So we actually have this maintainer who has been automating the, tracking the diff thing with using git command. So I think these kind of tips can be shared somewhere.
Yeah, so what I remember on this topic, Jim, was, and I guess maybe I misunderstood the question. I thought you were talking about, hey, do the localization teams have any tools that help them to figure out which pages have changed so they need to retranslate them? Was that part of the question or no?
Yeah, I believe that's what Kohei was talking about as well.
Okay, so from what I recall, the China localization team and the Korean localization team, I thought at least one of them had very good tools. And I remember we were discussing this when we were at a KubeCon. I think it was KubeCon in Shanghai, one of those. And so the thought was, well, is there a way for them to share those tools? So we might want to circle back with the China localization team and see if there's a way to get some reuse. Because I can't remember which, either the Korean team or the China team or both had really good tools for tracking changes, and they had some really automation there.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be really helpful, and I agree with that. And I know that there's a challenge where everyone localizes differently, different branching strategies, but it seems at the very least there should be a general way it could be hosted in our Kubernetes website, or even that could be a document that could be localized saying, run this one command, find out what documents have changed, whether that aligns with your strategy or not. Just a
Right.
quick universal way to find that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So another thing from the website perspective, so this K8s.io docs contribute / localization. So this page basically teaches how to start a new language localization, right? Yeah, and it also describes how you manage the members of your localization. But I think this is completely lacking of some very critical information, which is how to keep maintaining the a certain language. So I actually sneak into the Korean localization translation of this page, and I found that they actually don't have the page, even though they have the most numbers of the translated pages. Then I wondered why. Then I found that they forked from this page. I forgot the exact URI, but localization Korean or something. Then like they actually created their own page describing how can you start Korean localization, as in like what's the branch strategy and how they maintain the terminology because localization can do like either way, either of the two ways, completely translating the word or just borrowing the English word from the English word into their, you know, letters or their spelling. So yeah, I found it really useful. Then yeah, I actually wrote thank you to the localization team in the Slack. Then we also made our own fork, and yeah, now we have the localization page, but for completely different purpose, because it doesn't make sense to describe how to make a new language localization into Japanese, right? So sorry for the long story, but the takeaway is, I think you should create some pages, or at least one directory that you can make your own pages for localization teams, so that they can like maintain the documentation better, like not depending on other platforms such as Google Docs, or I don't know, their own wiki or something, because Markdown is actually a really good way to, you know, maintain the difference using Git. Yeah, that's how we started localization work, I think. Yeah, not just slightly, but more than that, like a bit faster, so that we can just, hey, you're a newcomer, just read this page. Then, like, you know, it's much way easier to explain how everything works.
Yeah, no, that's really good feedback. And I completely agree that there is documentation that is vastly improved about getting started. But there's definitely, once you have started, there's not really that ongoing area that is lacking. I see Tim added in chat here. We could potentially give localization teams permission to update their own READMEs and their own sections. You want to talk a little bit more about that, Tim?
Sure. I know that for the rest of the site, there's a fairly strong sort of, you know, your PR will not merge instruction that you must first of all create the English content, and then you add the content in your localization. So don't document pod disruption budget in Korean first. It must always go into English as a sort of leader localization, and then it's localized. And I understand why that's happened. I think it's a good rule for the technical documentation. It doesn't hold to me that, like, that's how you should describe like the page on how to localize the site into Korean or Japanese or Ukrainian, because the only people who need to know about that content by definition speak the language Korean, Japanese, Ukrainian. So I would never have had a problem with that a PR like that merging. You know, it was not something that someone would block and say, oh, you can't have it. But it's not enough, I think, for it to be okay. I think the overall SIG needs to communicate that is fine and encouraged. If people feel they have to fork the repo to get that documentation to land, that's a shame, because I don't want people to feel like that.
Yeah, I would agree. And another option too that might be worth exploring is, I know we have our wiki on the Kubernetes website, which has PR wranglers and generally fairly permissive editing rights for anyone who would like to. Potentially, we might be able to leverage the just general K website wiki as a form of, you know, main readmes, things of that nature. But yeah, I completely see the need here, and I think it's going to be a collaborative effort where we say, here's kind of the structure of the data that we're looking to that we're going to look to present per localization. So if you're new to a localization team, you don't need to feel like you need to create this massive document of a massive strategy that mirrors what the Korean folks are doing, but have some core content of here's what is expected of contributors, things of that nature for onboarding. I completely agree. For this, I'm really happy to open the issue and start the conversation, but I don't have the bandwidth to really run with this one. Kohei, would you mind tagging along with this and helping out with this effort? Or I know you're very busy.
I think I don't know how to explain it, but like, I don't think this is something that just my I alone can be done, because like this is, I think, basically a lot of like different language team should cooperate to each other, like especially like let's say like Korean people or Chinese people like that already have like a large number of translation done. Yeah, maybe we can include us too. I would gladly do that, but I'm not sure if we have the best choice of localization. So I think we can try to standardize or like it not even standardize, just share the knowledge.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, I'm not asking you to completely own this task or to complete it. It's definitely going to be effort between all of the different localizations. What I was looking for is more of a partner to help lead this if I were to work on creating the issue and getting this started, just making sure that keeping up with it and keeping up with the communications as well. And anyone else who's interested in volunteering too, I'd be open to tagging along. I just know personally, I don't have the bandwidth to take on driving this project, but I'm happy to start the discussion and keep up with it. And Tim, I saw you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Jim, you mentioned the same thing. I want to repeat what Jim said and emphasize it because it's my point here that I guess I'm going to call out names. Brad, Divya, Abigail, and Ray. If any of you are on the Kubernetes Slack and I've got the cycles to pick a Slack channel for a localization, introduce yourself, and just sort of reiterate the message from here that'll be in an issue. If you want to step forward, that would be fantastic. And it is it's very divisible work. So I hope someone feels empowered to.
So what are you asking for again?
To introduce, to maybe slice up the localizations, to introduce yourself in a localization Slack channel in English and explain that we want to make these pages exist. We want the localizations team help to do it. And we want to make it very clear that they don't have to, any bureaucracy to go through, that they can just do that. And that's a good thing to do.
Okay. So Jim, were you just going to capture that request in an issue, and then we can just see the exact phrasing and wording of what you want us to do, and then I'll be happy to help do it.
Yeah,
that's what I think, Jim.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say for the issue, I would plan on opening up just the general problem scope, what we're dealing with here, the fact that some of the localizations are having to create a fork to maintain their contributor guides, kind of the lack of information in the localization documentation, and really just copying all the different localization teams, all I think 12 of them, and just really get all of the different stakeholders involved, just open up the discussion there. But I believe in tandem to that, what Tim's referring to is really just opening up that door, saying, hey, we're here to help. Just in addition to solving this problem together.
Right, absolutely. So the big issues, we're seeing them forking some stuff, and I just want to reach out and see what problems they're having trying to do localization, and maybe we can help build some tribal knowledge and help get things addressed. Is that sort of it?
Yep. Yeah, okay. I would definitely say so. And, I think there's in general, there could be better outreach from the English documentation, special interest group to the other different localizations saying we're here and, if we can help, just generally opening up that path of communication.
Yep. And then I'll have to fall on my sword and embarrass myself. So do we have, I haven't looked at their localization channels because I just assumed they weren't. But do we have a list of that somewhere? Do they all have a certain convention they all follow so we can figure that out?
Yep, they're all Kubernetes -docs the localization language code.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And so the one way I found the localization channels was I searched docs, and you're obviously going to get all of the different docs channels as well as the localization ones. Cool. And just recently, I joined a good portion of them, if not all of them, making efforts to reach out to the folks in the Asia Pacific time zone for the APAC meeting. Just trying to do some more reach out there as well.
You don't have to do that in the Japanese channel because I'm the one who's leading.
yeah, we were hoping you'd say that.
I have one question about this. So do you think it's going to be issue-based communication, as in the GitHub issue communication, or is it going to be Slack-based?
I would imagine if there's anything formalized or anything that we want to track, it should go into the GitHub issue. We should be guiding folks into a resource that is all common and shared. I think just general outreach is good for just general communication and opening up awareness for that. So I would direct any specific questions, feedback, concerns to that issue, or if I were to discover and say, oh, this one localization team's struggling with this piece here, maybe I go and I comment on their behalf and say, here's a challenge that I've identified.
Do you think you're going to add another like GitHub label about this?
I wasn't planning on it at this time, but if there's a need to do so, I'd be happy to have that discussion. But yeah, for right now, I would plan on creating an issue describing the scope of the problem and then tagging all of the different localizations and starting the discussion that way.
Yeah, I was asking that because I don't think you want to add all the language tag in this, this kind of issues. So maybe having a new label would make sense to deal with that. But yeah, but at the same time, I think all the languages maintainer have to get tracked in the label as well. So yeah, we have to figure it out how to manage it better way.
Definitely. And I saw Ray, you came off mute there real quick.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on should this GitHub issue also track any key or big changes that we should alert teams to make to align changes within their own language, like the CNI, removing the CNI tabs?
I think it's
it's
going to be completely different.
Yeah, that's a very good point, is that they're all tracking at different rates. I think the suggestion would be awesome. I would love to see some form of communication that way. I just don't know that might be a little bit too beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, at least in my opinion. But I think that type of effort or that type of communication definitely would be beneficial long term for sure.
My concern about that is maybe I'm wrong or I'm right, I don't know, but like some localization team is like too behind compared to other localization, so they maybe not be able to make use of these kind of issues, like because it's too behind, so you just have to update the like other localization as the priority. So I think the first scope should be making the better contributor experience in localization.
Yep, definitely. I know that we're about a minute till on the hour when the meeting ends here, so I'm going to kick the other two items to next week. I know, Tim, you added that last one. Is that okay? All right, perfect.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll bring those up next week. I think this conversation was great. Like I said, some of these localization problems I don't see or I don't know how to fix, and so I really appreciate the insight in the chat that we've had. And with that, I'll leave it up for the last few seconds here for any other questions or comments, and we can call the meeting. All right, that's a SIG Docs meeting. Appreciate it, y'all. Talk to you later.
Bye.